Welcome to Standing on the Edge. This is your host, Randy Saplata. Today is March 4th, Friday. And today we're going to be talking about what is the use of negotiating if rules are ignored on the edge of the coin. We also have the topic of listen to what the government is not saying during Think Like the Rich. Today's going to be a short show, so we're going to go ahead and stop with just those two categories right there. By the way, if you like the content presented here and in other videos of mine, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up and or the like button so that we can go ahead and make sure that YouTube and Facebook keep me around for a while. And then you can subscribe to the channel as well so you can get more great content as it comes in. You are listening to Standing on the Edge. When we come back, it's time for the edge of the coin. Welcome back to the show. The Edge of the Coin is brought to you by the CS Media Group. We provide the outstanding talent and you get the extraordinary entertainment. The Edge of the Coin is a segment that shows us a way of opening up our mindsets to allow us to explore both sides of any situation. We're going to jump right into today's topic, which is this. What is the use of negotiating if the rules are ignored? All right. Now, there's been tons of movies and tons of books and all kinds of things that discuss about ignoring rules of engagement. The same thing goes in business too. If you ignore the rules of engagement, if you ignore the rules that are set up there, if you ignore the rules that the government has set up for you, then somebody is liable to go ahead and get penalized or to get hurt, or there's a lot of stuff that can happen. Get fined, whatever you want to go and call it. There's a lot of stuff that can happen when it comes to ignoring certain rules. And unfortunately for the law, ignorance is not an excuse. Ignorance is not an excuse. They don't care if you just don't know. There are times where it's really not going to matter at all. If they're in a bad mood, they're going to slap a fine on you at minimum. They'll throw you in jail if you really go ahead and get belligerent with them, or they're seriously looking for somebody to go ahead and do something about, to find something to use as an example. You just might be the case. You never know what's going to go on. Okay, so what's the use of negotiating if rules are ignored? Well, it's funny because most of the time when rules are ignored, it happens to be government officials that kind of ignore their own rules. And today I'm talking about the United States government right now that is ignoring its own rules of penalizing people that they are quote unquote threats to the system. Now, the weirdest thing about it is that when Ukraine, we're just going to go back about a week ago right now, when Ukraine was quote unquote invaded by Russia. And I mean, I can't really say at the moment whether or not that is actually an invasion or an incursion, and they're two totally different things. But we'll go with what the news media is saying right now. But I reserve the term right now to be changed at a later date. But with the invasion, in quotes, by Russia into Ukraine, everybody else is up in arms. They're in arms. They're totally upset because Russia's completely going off the chain. They're not supposed to be doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're going to slap sanction after sanction after sanction and penalizations and fines and all kinds of stuff all over the place for it. And yet there are so many things that are just not happening that are part of the rules that have been negotiated prior to this and told what was going to happen if anybody went ahead and quote broke the rules. Okay, well, basically it's this: for time unremembered at this particular moment, and things have been changed as well, but pretty much once you have broken a major rule of engagement and you've invaded or incurred or whatever, you've taken people and put them into another country that is not yours, and you've gone ahead and done it by force, whether it's one little tiny bomb that's gone ahead and exploded, or if it's a major massive takeover or something like that, basically here's what happens. The first thing that happens is that you are basically cut off from all resources, 100% of all resources, until things get settled. Now, a lot of times that's very extreme, but that's just how the U.S. government knows how to do things. Generally, is to the extreme. But with Russia, it seems to have been in a very, very roundabout way, and not quite as much as it could have been. Okay, because I was watching the president's speech about this on Tuesday, I guess it was. It wasn't the State of the Union that came up, but he came up and was talking about how Putin should never have gone in and invaded this country, and we're going to go ahead and threaten him. We're going to sanction him to the best of our ability, and there will be punishment had, and so on and so forth. And he was just going on and on and on, and how the United States stands with Ukraine. And the weird things, I should say, are first and foremost, Putin was not sanctioned. His heads of state were not sanctioned. Some of the oligarchs were. So 3 or 4 of the banks were. And that was really about it. Now, since then, there have been some other things that are going on. Had a few more people go ahead and get some sanctions going on, and as far as I can tell, I still haven't heard that this is true. But normally, the SWIFT banking system would lock out all banks, 100% of the banks out of their system, but that still has not been done. At the same time, we're still buying resources. The United States is still buying resources, as well as other countries as well, from Russia to help put into our own country as well. Oil being case in point right now, and the big one as well. We're buying Russian oil when we have oil here in the United States that we can go ahead and do. And so in a back-asswards way, we're funding Russia to continue doing what it wants to do. And we are saying, no, we're going to go ahead and punish you. And we're giving them a slap on the wrist. And that's really about it. At the same time, and we're going to go ahead and get into this too in the next segment, there are other things happening around the world that are directly involving Russia and the United States, and we're kind of handling those with kid gloves for the moment. Another one that a lot of people don't realize is which is going on is there seems to be talks right now trying to get the United States back into the Iranian nuclear deal that former President Obama had put into place, and then former President Trump took us back out of that deal again as well, because Iran was not holding true to what was going on. Well, now we're trying to go ahead and get back in for it, and the weird thing is the person negotiating or handling the negotiations is from Russia. And if I'm understanding correctly, the United States is basically saying, you know what? Just sign the deal. We'll go along with anything you say. And of course, Iranians are like, huzzah, huzzah! The Shah has come back. We're having a great time. I mean, obviously they're not doing that, but they're enjoying it because they're getting 100% benefits, while we get nothing out of this other than the fact that we, quote unquote, were able to go ahead and negotiate a deal. Well, you can't negotiate a deal if rules are ignored, because there is no deal. Plain and simple. Somebody is going to go ahead and get hurt, for lack of a better word. They're going to get penalized. They're going to get all kinds of things if the rules of the negotiation are completely ignored and broken. That's the whole reason why we have rules in the first place. And if you're going to go ahead and break those rules, then there needs to be some sort of accountability issue that is being caught in check or held in check, or being used, for that matter, You don't just go, okay, well, you did a horrible thing over here. We're going to kind of go ahead and push that to the side while we go ahead and work on what's going on over here. And by the way, we don't want anything here. Just go ahead and sign the name so we can go ahead and make sure we look good while we're doing this. And who is it going to punish? Well, at the end of the day, it's going to punish us, the United States, not the president, not the government. It's going to punish the United States, period. The people that went ahead and put him in power in the first place. And when this happens, I can almost guarantee there's going to be a huge uprising here in the United States. And it's almost as if this is exactly what is being planned. It's almost exactly as if this is what's planned. I mean, it makes no sense at all for Russia to, quote, again, I'm using this word unwillingly, but I'm using it, to invade a smaller country, one that is less than 1/10 of its own size, with a 1-to-1 ratio. And then you have news media that says, "Oh, Ukraine is putting up a damn good fight. They're on the ball. They're making sure people can't go ahead and come back." Guys, wake up. Wake up. If it's you and me and we're equal strength and I'm pushing against you and you're pushing against me, we're not going to go anywhere. Yeah, there's going to be a hell of a good fight. Yes, there will be. But you don't take over with just one punch. You can't take over with two punches. If it's a one-on-one fight, it's going to take a while, especially if you're very evenly matched. In order to go ahead and do something that's going to be in your benefit, you have to come with a preponderance. I love that word. A preponderance of force in some way to be able to go ahead and take over what you need to take over. Now, of course, there's all kinds of smart heads out there that are saying, well, Putin doesn't know what he's doing, or he's getting impatient, or he's really just a madman, or whatever, something like that. No, guys, let's put all of those arguments to the side for a second and focus on one thing, okay? First, again, it looks very much like it's staged. There have been very few casualties, so to speak, so far. There have been very few explosions in this country. And President Putin, if you really want to focus on that, this man is not stupid. He's not stupid. He was former KGB. You can't be KGB and be stupid. You can't. You can't be the head of a country. You can't be the head of the country and be stupid unless somebody else puts you in that place. And even then, the people behind you are not stupid. So for Russia to go ahead and take over a much smaller country that it had already taken over parts of. It had already occupied parts of it. Let's entertain for a moment that Russia does want to go ahead and finish occupying the rest of Ukraine. It wants to go ahead and take it over because it was part of the former Russian Soviet Union, and it was part of the massive global area that they went ahead and got, and they're trying to fight and take back, and so on and so forth. Let's assume for a second that is exactly what's going to happen, okay? Why then would Russia wait and agree to wait until after the Olympics are finished before they go ahead and send troops into this area? If they were really that impatient, they wouldn't want to wait until after Olympics. They would want to go ahead and get things done now. If they were really that impatient, they wouldn't send in a 1-to-1 force rather than completely overwhelming their enemy like they could. They wouldn't send in just a couple of miles of tanks and armored vehicles when they could have sent MiGs flying overhead with zero issues, have things done snap in, snap out, and take it over immediately. They wouldn't be working, so to speak, or negotiating with the government of Ukraine and calling names. They would just go and do things. That's the way Russia does it. They don't take the time to, you did this and you did that, and I'm going to go ahead, my daddy's bigger than your daddy sort of trial. They don't. If they're going to go ahead and do things, they're going to go around and like they did back 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they're going to say, you know what? If you don't believe I can do it, let me show you. And whoosh, there it goes. So if we assume then that Russia knows what it's doing, and we go ahead and assume that President Putin is smart and he is very intelligent, and then we assume that even the other things that look like they're staged and shouldn't be around, such as the fact that, okay, a few of the banks are on show as being penalized, but you still got most of the banking system open for business as they're doing it. And they're still trading around the world in oil and gold and silver and uranium and all kinds of other stuff that's going on. And they're negotiating a uranium enrichment program between the United States and Iran. There's very little that is not benefiting Russia at this moment. Very little that's not benefiting Russia at this moment. And that's really where I want to go ahead and stop. But I want you to think seriously, why is Russia doing this? And if Russia does do this and gets to be where they want to be, which is pretty much what's happening right now, what happens next? And it's not going to be to Russia. Think about that. You've been listening to Standing on the Edge. When we come back, it's time to think like the rich. Welcome back to the show. Think Like the Rich is brought to you by Mama's Decadence, offering luxurious refreshments for your body inside and out. You need to treat your body and that of your lover to a bit of luxury from Mama's. You can find out what's available by emailing Heather at mamasdecadence@gmail.com. Think Like the Rich is a segment designed to help everyone think past their circumstances and encourage a different course of action. Now, I went ahead and started off mentioning this a little bit earlier, but the topic for today is listen to what the government is not saying. Listen to what the government is not saying. And that's what I really want to go ahead and focus on right now. Because if you took a look at, and I'm talking solely with what's happening in the United States, if you took a look before the polls had started, you took a look at the poll standings for President Biden, before any of this happened, he was already sitting at a 40% approval rate, well below median, and certainly well below where most presidents sit after 1 year. There are very few presidents that sit below 60% after 1 year. But he's managed to take it down to 40% and then even further since this business with Russia. And I believe it's going to happen even worse than that. And the weirdest thing is this, okay? I mentioned during the last segment that you don't get into the head of a country unless you are intelligent or the people behind you are intelligent. Now, here's the weirdest thing, and I've brought this up before too, because President Biden, first and foremost, should never have been allowed to set foot into the White House because of his mental condition, okay? Because of his mental condition. It doesn't matter that the people behind him are smart. His mental condition should never have allowed him to go ahead and go in. Next, beyond that, and what's even scarier is that his right-hand person is Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris should never been allowed to be able to go ahead and be vice president because of the views that she took, and what she had even worse approval ratings going into the vote than President Biden has right now. But somehow still she managed to go ahead and make it into his ticket, managed to go ahead and make it as a vice president. If President Biden, for whatever reason, gets removed from that, then Kamala Harris becomes president. Kamala Harris has already proved inept in what she does right now. Now, she may have been a great attorney general for the state of California. She might know the law back and forth, okay? But when it comes to actually doing something about it, she has proven inept up to this point. If she were to go ahead and change her ways and do something different, which I hope would happen, then she could very well and easily get better. But at this particular moment, I don't see that happening, and I don't really go ahead and believe that if she became president, that she would do any better of a job. She would have to actually go ahead and get better now in order to prove herself worthy of that particular standing, which, again, I don't believe Biden has. But what's even worse than that is that the third person in line, if for whatever reason Biden got taken out and then Kamala Harris couldn't go ahead and fulfill the duties, it would then fall to Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, who basically has a history of tearing up speeches because she doesn't agree with it, saying one thing, turning around, doing another, whether it's for her benefit or not, whether it was legal or not. She has basically the habit of speaking into one hand and doing something with the other out of sight. Okay. And this is not going to be good if you are the head of a country. Not at all. That puts you basically right up in the place of where Russia is now. And I don't know about you, but I don't want two Russias, so to speak, in the same room, and definitely not in the world. There was a whole reason why we as a country decided to go ahead and move away from autocracy, away from the monarchies, away from one single person ruling as much as possible. There was a reason why we had our government set up as a democratic republic. The reason we got away from democracy as a whole was because that means that the strongest person wins every time, because they're going to bully everybody else in the room to thinking in or to saying that they think the same exact way. If you have a republic, at least you have a great chance of, yes, butting heads against each other, and maybe, yes, not getting anything done, but at least it's not going to be all one person controlling it or one party controlling it. It doesn't work that way. And we've proven that over the course of over 200 years. And now all of a sudden, we found out that democracy, surprise, surprise, is coming down to the strongest people in the room. And surprise, surprise, a lot of people in the Democratic Party are realizing that, hey, this is not what we signed up for. This is not what we signed up for. We're not being kept in the loop. We're being told and fed lies. We're being forced to repeat and regurgitate those same lies. And then we're told that when things change at the drop of a hat, that, oh, we've been actually secretly supporting this the whole time. We just wanted to go ahead and say otherwise. And let's just go ahead and let bygones be bygones. Well, you know what? I heard a radio host the other night that said things very succinctly. He says, you know what? I remember that I was forced to wear a mask. I remember that there were kids that had masks taped to their faces in school by teachers. I remember that people were forced to take a vaccine that did not help them. I remember that they were forced or refused to be seen medically because they wanted to get and take a medication that worked. I remember that all kinds of other crap happened, that people were going around taking off their masks in public while forcibly saying, you've got to keep the masks on. Talk about hypocrisy. And he said, I remember these things. Don't tell me that you can force these things on me and then call me a racist and call me a hater and call me all kinds of other things and spit in my head, spit on my face, talk, yell at me across the room, throw cherry bombs or something at my car, and then say, oh, but we're not enemies. Let's just let bygones be bygones. No. If nothing else, that is that, and I said this a year and a half ago, if nothing else, that has done nothing but create even more of a division than there was in the first place. And this is where it starts getting scary. Because if there's that much of a division, that means that we are very, very, very much and very soon on the edge of splitting internally. And when that happens, we've really got to go ahead and watch out, because things are going to go ahead and fall into place again, to where it's now going to be National Guard being called in and the armed forces, and they're going to have to go ahead and put down, quote unquote, an insurrection. And when they put down an insurrection, that means that lockdowns happen again. And that means that people, innocent people, are then put into jail and tortured and told that they cannot do things without certain, they're once again, they're going to go ahead and put down all kinds of rules and regulations that make no sense, and they're going to be locked out of the system by the same banking system that the United States refuses to use against Russia. And I truly believe that this is the whole reason why Russia is doing what it's doing, is because it is staging a war to distract from everything else that's being set up right now. And that's what scares me most. That's what scares me most. If you want to go ahead and figure out what's happening in the world today, if you want to figure out what to do with your business, if you want to figure out what to do with your life, then you need to listen to what the government is not saying. Okay? The government says, oh, we're going to go ahead and release the mask mandates, but they're not saying we were wrong. The government's saying, yes, you can go ahead and start opening up your businesses again. And we've gone ahead and created so many hundreds of thousands of jobs. And they're not saying that they did not create any new jobs. They only let the same people go back to work at their old jobs. That is not job creation. That is job relaxation. They're saying that they're allowing people to go ahead and start up their own small businesses again. And they're not saying that they're putting into place exonerating and a huge amounts of taxes on small businesses. They're saying that the small businesses need to cut their costs rather than slash the amount of pay that people are going ahead and getting paid. They're not saying that the biggest cost is paying people. They're saying buy American, and that will cut your cost. And they're not saying that you can't buy American because Americans don't have resources right now because of all of these past restrictions that they put on themselves. They're not apologizing. They're not even coming forth and saying anywhere like they were wrong. They're not coming out and saying we need to change things because of the fact that it doesn't work. They're definitely not taking responsibility for it. They're pretty much doing a Bonnie and Clyde. They're taking the money and they're running and hightailing out as much as they possibly can and as quick as they possibly can. Pay attention to what the government's saying. I mean, I've looked at it for years, and it didn't matter whether it was Republican or Democrat or independent. It didn't matter. Here's the way I looked at it. If they said something, I automatically assumed that there was more to the picture. If something was said, I automatically assumed that they were trying to distract me by doing something right in my face so that I wouldn't see what was happening back behind the scenes. And therefore, basically, they were lying to me. I've thought of that for the last 30 years. And the reason I thought of that was because I spent 7 years outside of the country, I saw how different countries were treating their own people. And then I came back to the United States and I saw how the United States was treating its people. And there was a complete dichotomy between the two, a complete difference between the two. I mean, growing up, I heard, go USA, we're the best, we're always the best, we've always been the best, and so on and so forth. And you know what? Yes, for the longest time, that was true. And yes, we are still barely the country that is the freest in the world when it comes to doing many things. But that's not telling me that we can still do everything that we did back in the 1970s, back in the 1960s, back in the 1930s, back in the 1800s, for Pete's sake. And again, it just comes down to control being ratcheted down and tightening up as we go along. And that's exactly where we are right now. Now, I did say that this was going to be a short show. I do apologize for that. I have to go ahead and basically do my governmental duty because I'm finishing up with my taxes today, and so I can go ahead and get my small business and keep it going as much as possible to try to go ahead and keep things, my costs, to a minimum, so to speak. You've been listening to Standing on the Edge. I want to give a shout out to my friends watching today. That is Lee Stroud, who always supports me, and I definitely appreciate it. Even if he doesn't agree a lot of times with my opinions, he still supports me, and I certainly appreciate that. A shout out also to my wife, Heather, because she is the one person that stands behind me regardless of what idiotic idea I happen to come across with. But I want to give a shout out also to everybody else, every one of you that liked supporting this show and the content in it. Don't forget to send me a text at 470-554-2134 or send me an email to joinmeattheedge@gmail.com so I can give you a link to the GoFundMe page if you want to be a partial sponsor. All it costs is $1. $1 is all I'm looking for to help continue this content to be able to give it to you. My next show is going to be next Friday, March 11th at noon, as always. But until then, I want you to remember, expand your awareness. Think of something every day to help you on your own path. And hopefully soon, I'll see you on the edge. Have a great weekend, folks. Have a good day, Lee.